Hi guys, welcome to the first video on my channel. If you have not seen my channel intro explaining who I am and you just stumbled across this, hi, I'm Livy. This channel is called Olivia and Her Camera. I'm just going to be doing a bunch of random videos, and my first one is actually a Pixar theory about the movie Soul. This video is an extension of a YouTube video by a YouTuber called Seamus Gorman. So if you have not seen his video that he posted like yesterday probably, go watch that first. It will be linked. Go follow him. Go subscribe. Go follow him on all of his social medias. He's a great guy. He's so funny. I love his videos. So go watch that just so you know what's going on, because I'm going to kind of explain the theory, but I'm kind of just going to go into my own thing. Okay, so I'm going to first go into a few reasons why I think Joe was the chosen one, because that's the main question in this video. But I also have a few more things to add to Seamus's theory, so I want to do some of those at the end. But first, I want to give you a few reasons why I think they chose Joe specifically. The first one being that I think that they wanted to find someone who was at the point where they're almost a lost soul, but they're not exactly a lost soul. Because if they're going to have Joe come in and inspire 22 to live life, why not have Joe also come in and be inspired to live his life? Because if 22 sees someone who is so excited to get back to what seems like such a mediocre life, they're going to be curious about what is so great about life, and Joe is going to have a new appreciation for the life he almost lost. Speaking of the fact that Joe almost lost his life, my second reason is that I think that Joe was supposed to die that day anyway, and that the Jerrys decided to save Joe from death. They knew that the next time the mentors were going to come in was that day, and they decided to pick someone who they thought was someone who had a lot of hope in life and was also going to die, but they could change it. On the way out of the audition, before Joe falls into the manhole, he passes by falling bricks and swerving cars, but he doesn't die. And I think this is because the Jerrys decided to interfere with that. They decided, well, if we make it so that Joe doesn't die, then if they drop him into the Great Before, onto the belt, then Joe will still be there. He will still not be on Earth, but he won't be exactly dead yet. Because when Joe asks if he's dead at one point in the movie, another Jerry says that he is not dead yet. Like, how does the Jerry know that he isn't dead? Aren't most of the people that are there dead? I'm very confused. But anyway, I think that it's because Joe was supposed to be dead. That's why I think that the count was off, because Terry's count would still be off because Joe was supposed to be dead, but he escaped death with the help of the Jerrys. So, my third reason being that Joe wasn't just some extraordinary person. All of 22's other mentors that they talk about are like these amazing people that we've all heard of. But they never worked. And the Jerrys are getting sick of 22 being there forever. And they're like, you know what? Maybe what we need is a normal person. Maybe what we need is someone who is so inspired to get back to their life that they don't want to die yet. And they are dropped in there to help 22 specifically. Because when 22 is assigned to Joe, it is actually Dr. Borgenson that is being assigned to 22 And I think that that table out there where Joe grabbed the name tag was actually just a table full of Dr. Borgenson name tags, to be quite honest. Because we don't see any other mentors being dropped in the same way that Joe does, but there's a room full of them. So what if, when someone dies, they are actually all transported to the Great Before? And there are about, what I think are 2 buildings, one with mentors and one with non-mentors. In the non-mentor building, when you die, they prepare you for the fact that you have died before you go off to the great beyond. Because when Joe is on the belt, he meets 3 people, and this one woman tells him that this is the great beyond, that he's being transported to the great beyond. But Joe didn't know that. I wouldn't know that. So how did she know that that is the great beyond unless they were coming from the great before, where they had just learned what happened to them and they finally all accepted death, which is why Joe's the only one who's freaking out. I mean, it makes sense. So, and then the mentors are transported into their seats in that other building, which is why we don't see anyone else just randomly fall from the sky, and which is why Joe would be the only one to be out there to grab a name tag. So, and therefore he would be Dr. Borgenson, who I believe is a real person but isn't actually dead yet. And so then when 22 and Joe go into that room where he scans his hand and shows 22 that he's not actually Dr. Borgenson, this does 2 things. It shows 22 that he's not Dr. Borgenson, and it also helps Joe see everything from his life and inspires him even more to get back to his life. Because remember, the Jerrys really, really, really want Joe to come in wanting to go back to his life and go back to living and go back in a way that will inspire 22 to finally get their badge and go and live, because that's their goal. Like, you know what I mean? Let's get back into more of the theory, because there is more I want to say. I think that the Jerry's plan was to, in fact, have Joe just come in and show 22 that people truly want to live, and that this person who almost died, who was supposed to die but didn't, got back to Earth because they wanted to. So, when the one Jerry comes up to Joe and 22 after they have tried for the whole day to try to get 22 to find their passion, Joe is told that it is time to go to the great beyond, which I think further proves my theory that everyone goes to the great before they go to the great beyond, not just mentors, because if the mentors do, then I'm sure everyone else does, because they know what the great beyond is, they know what's going on. But anyway, and then after that, 22 decides to take Joe to Moonwind. I think that the Jerrys at least bet on the fact that hopefully 22 would be inspired by Joe. And if 22 was inspired by Joe, they would take Joe to Moonwind, where Moonwind would help Joe get back to Earth. I think that Moonwind was most definitely in on the plan, but I think that the original plan was have Joe drop in, have Joe be assigned to 22, have Joe be a normal person who 22 wants to know why they want to get back to their life so bad, because up until now they've just had a bunch of what 22 see as boring people who did amazing things, but they're not really that excited about life anymore because they know they've died. So, and then 22 would hopefully, if Joe succeeds, take Joe to Moonwind, who 22 knows is the only person who can help Joe get back to life, hopefully. So, I think that the plan was to have Moonwind, then just have Joe be sent back to his body, and hope that by that time 22 had their badge, and that when the one Jerry comes up to Joe and sees that he has failed and says, oh, time to go the great beyond. It's because their plan just didn't work and it was time for them to actually let the cow be set straight. But the plan went wrong. And that's when Joe accidentally knocks 22 into Joe's body and Joe is put in the cat's body. This being an accident is actually not a bad thing though, because when Moonwind sees that their plan has gone slightly wrong, he probably goes to the Jerrys and he's like, look, they both fell into Earth. And the Jerrys are like, you know what, maybe, just maybe, this is what 22 needs. They're like, you know what, 22 was at least inspired enough to spend more time with Joe as we hoped. So maybe being on Earth will finally show 22 how good life can be, which it does. I want to read to you a quote from right before 22 takes Joe to Moonwind to try to back up my theory a bit more. In this moment, 22 says, I have been here for who knows how long and I've never seen anything that's made me want to live. And then you come along. Your life is sad and pathetic and you're working so hard to get back to it. Why? I mean, this I gotta see. I think that in that moment, 22 is verifying that the Jerry's plan is kind of working. Because, as I said, 22 has been here for so long. So their last hope is this, to send in someone whose life isn't great, but they still want to get back to it so badly, hoping that 22 will finally have their interest piqued. So, they fall down to Earth. Moonwind and the Jerrys know they're on Earth, and Terry is freaking out, and the Jerrys are just like, oh yeah, so sad, whatever, the count's off, we don't care. They know the count's off. But anyway, so on Earth, Joe and 22, I almost said 21, Joe and 22 are both taught lessons. 22 is inspired by all the people around them that seem to just be having a great life. And they finally realize what's so good about it. They get to feel Joe's feelings. They get to taste food. They get to meet Connie, who, despite seemingly hating life and thinks everything is just such a bother, still loves trombone. And 22 realizes that if Connie and everyone else can just find things that they love in life, maybe 22 can too. And they start to just appreciate every little thing, and that's when they learn how much to love life. And Joe, he just misses his body so much that by the time he's able to be himself again, he just goes out there and he stands up to Dorothea and he tells her what he wants. And even before that, when he's still in the cat's body, he has 22 stand up to his mom. Because at this point he realizes, you know what, I'm taking my life back. I almost lost it today. I want my life back. And I think that the Jerrys at this point were planning to take 22 and Joe out once 22 got their badge. But Terry ended up getting to 22 first. And this is when their plan suddenly is totally wrong. So 22 does in fact get their badge, but then 22 gives it to Joe, where Joe goes and lives his life, and the Jerrys probably know this, but they just hope that Joe will come back. But how did they know Joe could come back other than through the zone? Which brings me back to Moonwind being in on it. So, Moonwind and Joe and 22 are all supposed to meet up at 6:30, but Moonwind then says in the zone, when Joe comes back that he got worried that their plan had gone wrong. He may have been just referring to the plan that he had with Joe in 22 or the plan he had with the Jerrys. But why is Moonwind in the zone at that point unless he's expecting Joe to come back, and that's his plan with the Jerrys, is to be there to show Joe where 22 is when Joe comes back, because they're really betting on the fact that Joe will come back. So Moonwind shouldn't have been in there though, because if you think about it, why would he want to meet at 6:30 other than that's when he gets off of work, or at least has a break, but it's probably when he gets off of work. But when we see Joe in the zone about to go talk to 22, we see Moonwind go back to Earth, and he's just flipping his sign, but it's completely dark out. There's no people on the streets, and it doesn't seem like the businesses are open, so why would you be spinning a sign for a business that is not open at that point unless you needed to be in the zone to ensure that Joe gets to 22? So, the Moonwind theory is a bit far-fetched. I know that, but I at least think that the Jerrys planned on dropping someone in who was struggling themselves with finding hope in life so that they could inspire 22 and inspire themselves, which is what happened. They picked someone who was going to die anyway, so if their plan didn't work, they could just send them on to the great beyond and it would be fine. But the count was off, and that's because Joe was supposed to die at that moment. And so as things went on, their plan seemed to get more and more out of hand, but it was still working by some miracle. And that's just because Joe and 22 were really just vibing. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, they took someone who they knew needed inspiration themselves and could inspire 22. And they brought them in, and their plan worked. They were just hoping that by the end of that training time that 22 would have their badge. And when 22 didn't, they were just like, oh, go back to the Great Beyond. Oh, it's time to take you to the Great Beyond. But then 22 was like, no, no. And that's where their plan just started to be more controlled by Joe and 22 and whatever they were doing. So even if Moonwind wasn't in on it, I think that that is why Joe is the chosen one. Because he was just an ordinary guy. And if all these other people weren't inspiring 22, why not just try some ordinary guy who wants so badly to get back to his seemingly mediocre life? All along, the Jerry's plan was for Joe to be the chosen one because he was a normal guy who was about to die, who needed some inspiration himself, and they hoped that both Joe and 22 would find inspiration from each other, and they did end up doing that. And so the original plan was that Joe would just help 22 get their badge that day, and that Joe would then be rewarded by being taken back to Earth. But then all these other things happened, and they were all out of the hands of the Jerrys. It started to just be controlled by what Joe and 22 were doing. And even though they didn't account for that, they were just kind of like, let's see what happens. And so even if Moonwind wasn't necessarily in on it, maybe if he was just spinning his sign at night for no reason, maybe if he just happened to be the one who helped Joe get through the portal, that is why Joe is the chosen one, because he is a normal guy who wanted to get back to his normal life, and they hoped that that would pique 22's interest. So that's my theory. I really hope you guys liked it. I know it was probably kind of hard to follow. This was my first video. Please bear with me. But if you liked me and if you want to stay along for the ride, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you are Seamus watching this, I really hope that I helped you in some way. And I really hope that everyone just kind of understood at least a bit of what I was saying, because I honestly feel like I was rambling that whole time. But anyway, until next time, I have been Olivia and your camera. Peace out.